Are you ready to get unstuck from your repetitive daily routine, tap into your mind and body's internal cues, and just discover the things in this world that will lead you to your life's greatest potential? Me too. I'm glad you're here today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Greatest Potench podcast. I am your host, Taylor, and today is part 2 of our scheduling series. So, welcome. Hopefully you tuned in for episode 1 or part 1 of this series where we discussed the very, very basics of scheduling. But if you didn't tune in to that episode, I'll give you just a really, really quick recap before we get into today's content, which is time budgeting. So, last episode, to put it super, super quickly, we talked about just the very basic steps in creating a schedule for yourself. So, I used an analogy from back in my preschool days where I talked about visualizing your schedule as a jar that you have to fit in various size objects into. And the way I kind of set up the visual was the most important and the most mandatory activities were the largest objects for the jar. And then the activities that don't really make a huge impact on your day-to-day life, but would be nice to squeeze in if you had the room for it, was the teeniest, tiniest little object. So, in the basis of creating your schedule, you want to think about it in terms of putting your really, really big objects in there first to make sure they all fit, and then letting those smaller objects trickle in between the cracks, so that way you have time to do all your main priorities and still have time to have fun in life. Then I kind of discussed some obstacles or barriers that may come up when you're trying to plan your perfect schedule and life just happens, right? So maybe you miss a meeting, maybe you show up late to something, maybe you oversleep, but all of these are completely normal. We're humans, we're not perfect, and I'd walk us through kind of some steps to combat these or how to handle them if they do come up. I left us off on kind of a cliffhanger last week because a big portion of scheduling that I learned in one of my college entrepreneurship classes was this weird concept called time budgeting. And it's honestly so unspoken about, I feel like, that when I was talking to my friends about it and when Sam heard that this was going to be my topic, he was genuinely kind of confused. He was like, "What do you mean time budgeting?" So I'm happy that that's what I'm talking about today, so hopefully I can teach you something new. And if not, maybe I'll just give you a refresher on how to do a time budget, and hopefully it will help take your scheduling up to the next level. So basically, what in the world is time budgeting? Are we spending time creating a budget? Okay, like a little bit, but this isn't about financials. This is actually going to be a budget specifically around the way you spend your time. So it's really more of a time management technique than a financial technique, right? So creating a typical budget, you set out, okay, in my food for the month, I want to spend $300. I don't know where you live. In Chicago, that's kind of realistic, but say for food, you want to spend $300 this month. Okay, so throughout the month, you have the parameter of $300 and you keep that in the back of your mind and maybe you track it throughout the month to make sure that you're kind of sticking to that 300 or staying under it so that you don't spend more than you have. Time budgeting is the same thing, but instead of budgeting out actual money or budgeting out things you're going to spend, you're budgeting out how you want to spend your time throughout the week. And this is something I really, really encourage doing on the weekly basis. I know in last week's episode, I talked about scheduling kind of on the monthly scale, got into it a little bit in terms of the week, but it was more broad in that monthly aspect. Time budgeting is really, really most effective when you do it on a weekly basis. So with all that being said, that's kind of the basis of what a time budget is. So when I was in college in this entrepreneurship class, this was one of the lessons that stuck with me in a way that I don't necessarily do it every day and I don't practice it often, but it's always in the back of my mind when I'm creating my own schedules or when I'm going throughout life or thinking about when to plan things in. So last episode, I kind of talked about that exercise I wanted everyone to go through, or even if you didn't go through it, an exercise that helps me when I'm thinking about my schedule. And this exercise was to start with your high priority items, pencil them all into your month, then move on to your medium impact items, pencil those in, and then at the end of the exercise, the goal was to look at the days that you had spent the most time or that you had penciled in the most activities. And that's how you know, okay, these are my really heavy load days. I'm not going to plan extra activities or make additional plans on those days where I'm super, super busy. Time budgeting takes that activity up to the next level and kind of dives in even deeper and gives you a true analysis on, like, to the decimal point how you're spending your time in these activities. So like I did in the preschool example last week with the jar and the visual, I want to teach this or kind of talk about it in the same way that I learned in college, because it made a lot of sense. And it does stray a little bit from last week's episode about the scheduling. I think I laid out 4 categories for us last week about how to split up your time. It was like the have to do's, the should do's, the want to do's, and the could do or the would like to do. This week, I want to break it out specifically into 3 categories, because we're going to be working with numbers, we're going to be working with percentages and decimals, and I don't want to get too carried away with too many categories. So I think keeping it with 3 for today will make it a little bit simpler. And, you could translate that into the lessons that we learned in last week's episode too about scheduling. If you wanted to keep it in 3 buckets, it might be helpful that way. But just a disclaimer, for the sake of today's examples and today's episode, we're going to be working in 3 categories. So if you didn't know this already, I don't know if I've talked about this, I love Microsoft Excel. It is so nerdy of me, and it's funny because that was like something me and Sam bonded over when I first met him, was that we both love Excel and we geek out over it. So that's just a fun fact about me. If there's something I can do in Excel, I'm gonna use Excel for it. So now that we've got that out of the way, part of our activity in college was to create kind of a map or a spreadsheet, if you will, of this kind of setup. So the way I have it laid out, and I have it pulled up on my computer right in front of me in Excel so that I don't miss a detail, because this is a really, really cool activity and I want to be super thorough with it. So on the left, like upper corner of the Excel, it's like the main spreadsheet part. I have across the top, I have 9 columns. A first column is just like a description column, so ignore that one. Then I have all of the days of the week in the next 7 columns. And then to the right of Sunday's column, I have a total column. So it will kind of sum everything up for me, and I can just get a better grasp on the numbers at the end of it. Don't worry, I'm going to explain what all of these numbers are. If you're like, what are you talking about summing things up? You haven't even mentioned a number yet. I'll get there, trust me. But I'm just kind of explaining the layout of this first. So across the top, I have all the days of the week, and then I have a total right next to it. Down the left side of the chart, I have it split into 3 categories, and then under each one of those categories, I have the actual description of the activity that would fall into it. So I have the 3 categories are must do, should do, and would like to do. Those are the category names. And then within each of those categories, I have the individual activities. So for example, in the must do, I have work, eat, shower and get dressed, cosmetic routine, transportation, and rehearsal. So those are my examples for the must do column. So that's the way I have this massive spreadsheet laid out. I'm going to get into a little bit of the details as to how I use this spreadsheet, and how, even if you don't love working in Excel or Google Sheets or anything like that, how you can do this for yourself. You just might need to keep a calculator on hand, which is just one extra step, but you can completely do this exercise with or without a spreadsheet. So off to the right side of this table that I just described to you, I have 2 little sections. The first section, I have row after row. I have the first row says hours in a day. That's obviously 24, unless you live on a different planet where you get more time, because please, if you do, let me know and invite me to live there with you, because the one thing in this world that I wish I could always have more of is time. Anyways, right below hours in a day, I have hours of sleep. Right below that, I have hours of activity. So because I'm working in Excel, hours in a day, to the column to the right of that, I just typed in 24, because obviously we live on Earth, we get 24 hours. Hours of sleep, I put in what I want to get realistically in hours of sleep. I put in 7 here. That's my stretch goal. I would love to get 7 hours of sleep if possible. I also am aware that I live a super busy and chaotic and full life. So if I don't necessarily get to that 7 hours, my body will pay for it, I'm sure, at some point, but that's just my goal. And then hours of activity, rather than me manually entering in a number. And this is where, if you're not working in Excel or Google Sheets, you could literally just calculate 24 minus your hours of sleep. So in this case, mine is 17. But I just created an equation to subtract my hours of sleep from the hours in a day to give me how many waking hours I have to work with to use in this budget. So similarly to a financial budget, this could be like your hours in a day would be maybe your income. So you would put the gross or net income that you take home in your main bucket, and then you take out the amount of money that you maybe need for like your rent or non-negotiables that will be paid every month. Like rent and bills could be a good example of that second one. So then really when you're budgeting financially, it's that disposable income that you're really budgeting with. You're not budgeting with your rent because that has to be paid no matter what, or you get evicted, I'm pretty sure. So it's similar to working with a financial budget. That was the whole reason I went on that tangent, is because we have 24 hours in a day. But realistically, you need to sleep. So just before we even get into the activity, very important you eliminate the hours you want to sleep, or else your budget is going to get really wacky and you're going to realize, oh my God, I planned my whole day perfectly, and then you didn't leave yourself any time to rest. So yeah, have to get that out of the way. Right below these categories, I then wrote down, again, the categories must do, should do, and would like to do, like one on top of the other. And to the right of these is where we're going to start getting into the actual technique of this time budget. So before you start throwing out numbers, before you start actually typing anything into this sheet, you want to make sure that you allocate what percent of your day you want to spend doing each of these categories. So when we initially did this exercise, the base levels that our professor gave us were that your must-do category should be 50% of your time, your should-do category should be 30% of your time, and your would-like-to-do category should be 20% of your time. So if you add those all up, that equals 100% of your time. Remember, that's 100% of your waking time. That's 100% of those 17 hours for myself, for example. That's not 100% of 24 hours. Just keep that in mind, because we're not going to budget in our sleep. We're just going to remove it right away so that we don't have to plan for sleep every single day. So those are the baseline percentages, 50, 30, and 20. But realistically, everybody's lives look different. Everybody has different priorities, and everyone has a different amount of activities that they're going to put into each of these buckets. So when I just pulled up this file to look at it before recording this episode, I realized that 50, 30, and 20 didn't really serve me anymore, because 50% of my time that I had in college was around 8 to 9 hours. And now I'm working 8 hours of the day, if not sometimes more. So if my entire must-do category is only 8 hours, I'm going to go over that literally every single day. So that just wasn't realistic to me anymore. Same with my would like to do, like 20%, that's a lot of stuff. And I think when you move from that college to professional life or whatever comes after college or graduation for you, your time shifts a little bit and you don't need to spend as much time doing things you want to do because you just have naturally more responsibilities and more time allocated to those responsibilities. So when I reassessed this today, right before recording, I actually shifted my percentages to my must-do category being 65%, my should-do category being 25%, and then my would-like-to-do category being 10%. And I think if I did the math right, those should equal to 100. I think 65 and 25 is 90, I believe. And then I think obviously 90 and 10 is 100. So I did have to look at it a little bit differently because I'm in a completely different stage of life than I was the last time I did this exercise. On that note too, the activities I put in each of the categories have shifted as well since I graduated college and moved into a full-time career. So for example, when I looked at my past document that I had done for this activity, my must-do category, I had going to the gym in there. Now I have moved that down to the should-do because my rehearsal for dance is now my primary form of exercise. But with that being said, the driving time and the practice time that I have to put into my rehearsals for dance don't allow me with the flexibility anymore to have to go to the gym. It's more of something that I should do, obviously, for my health and for my body, but I need to plan all these other things first, right? Like I need to eat, I need to shower, I need to travel from place to place and to and from work. So even looking at the things that are falling into these categories, those will also shift depending on what stage of life you're in. So if you're listening in college, or if you're listening in high school, or if you're listening and you have kids, your activities in each category are going to probably look different than mine, and that is okay. I'm just feeding you my personal examples to make sure that you have a good basis on how to understand how to work the activity. So, like I said, I listed out the must do, should do, and would like to do over here on the right side of the chart. This is separate, this is not included in the chart. And so the reason I mentioned those percentages is because in Excel, I made a formula to where I multiply the percentage as a decimal by the hours of activity in my day. For example, I have the hours of activity. I put that formula in to take 24 minus 7 for my hours of sleep. That spit out 17. So in my must do box right next to that, I multiply 65%, so I put that as a decimal, 0.65, and I multiplied that by 17, and that spit out 11.05. But for the sake of this time budget activity, it's not super easy to work in like 0.05s and like 0.7s and weird numbers like that, because if you're thinking about it, you need to allocate time into like minutes and hours, and 0.05 is kind of weird to convert in your head from being like on a scale of 100 to a scale of 60 in terms of minutes and hours. So I actually made a column right to the right of this where I just rounded up to the easiest whole number that made sense. So for example, in my should do category, I allocated 25% of the time to that. That spit out 4.25 for me, which technically is 4 hours and 15 minutes, a little easier to work with, but for the sake of the time budget, I just rounded it down to a straight 4. Same with my would like to do category, I multiplied 10%, so 0.1, times that 17 hours that I'm working with. It spit out 1.7. Again, that's about an hour and 45 minutes, but just for the simplicity and making it easier to work with and budget with, I rounded it up to 2. So this is all the background work that I have done before I even get into the actual budgeting of my time. So making sure that you have a good setup and you understand what are these numbers, where are they coming from, why are they the numbers that they are, and having a good basis on the percentage of time that you want to spend in each one of these categories is a very, very important first step before we even get into actually budgeting out the time. So make sure you take the time to do that for yourself, really thinking about allocating the right percentage to the right chunks of activities. So with all of that being said, now we're going to jump into how to budget this time. So I'm going to start in my Monday column, and I'm going to just work my way completely down or completely across my must-do categories first. And I'm gonna go activity by activity, just for the sake of this example. And then you can do the same if you're working on this at home, or if you just wanna kind of visualize as we go along, if you're not in front of a computer or you don't have interest in doing this activity, just to kind of visualize what we're doing and how we're working through it. So in Monday, I'm in my Monday column. My must-do has 65%, and my little side work on the right here says that I get 11 hours to work with for my must-dos. So immediately across the board, just straying even away from Monday, I'm going to click and drag 8 hours all the way through, Monday through Friday, 8 hours, I absolutely have to work. I know that's not going to change, and sometimes it may be a little bit more, sometimes it may be a little bit less, but I know at least consistently it'll be about 8 hours. So I feel comfortable dragging that in. So I put that Monday through Friday. On Saturday, I'm gonna leave that as a 0 because I surely hope that I'm not doing a lot of work on Saturday. Sunday, I am gonna give myself an hour and a half just because that's when I get a lot of time to like sit there, go through emails, clear out priorities, really realign myself with what I'm gonna be doing on Monday. And 1.5 hours is really generous, but depending on the kind of week I'm having or depending on the kind of month and what work is expected of me, I like to give myself the flex. So I went ahead and put an hour and a half on Sunday. So in that total category, or the total column I talked about to the right of Sunday, after all the days of the week, I actually created a sum equation, which if you're familiar with Excel, you know what that means. But if you're not familiar with Excel or you're not working in like a spreadsheet for this, you're just going to add up every single hour amount or every single number in that work row for these sections. So for me, it's 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 0 plus 1.5. I used Excel, so it did that all for me just with the click of a button, but that equals 41.5 hours, which if you think about it, okay, yeah, that makes sense. People normally work like 40 hours a week. 41.5 sounds completely normal, so that checks out. And this total column is really more to check and balance yourself. It's not mandatory for the activity, and I didn't actually have this column when I did the exercise in college. But then when I was looking back on it now, I thought it would just be a cool metric for me to have to look at how much time am I actually spending doing each of these things during the week. So just more of something I thought would be cool to look at, but absolutely not necessary. So then obviously just going through the rest of the categories, we have showering and getting dressed every day, my cosmetic routine, more like my hygiene and just like personal, well-being routine, transportation to and from whatever I may be doing that day, and then dance rehearsal. It's important for me, and I want to interject here because I do only have actual dance rehearsal 2 days a week, but if there's an activity in your week that you know is going to absolutely happen at least once and you know it has a designated time to it, I do encourage you to add that into this time budgeting thing, because even if it is only one day for a very small amount of time, when we get to the very end of the exercise, it can really impact how you're spending your time. So I think it is important, just for the sake of the exercise and the sake of kind of budgeting our time, to include it. Even if it is small, like I said, dance is a total of 5 hours a week, if that. but I did think it was important to still include it because it does impact the amount of time I have to spend outside of my must-do category. So pretend I told you all my awesome values and time amounts. My must-do category is complete. I have allocated a certain time amount to every activity that I determined was a must-do. So now, in my beautiful Excel document, I made a total at the bottom of each column of each day. So at the bottom of Monday, in my must-do section, I have a total of the entire amount of time that I spent doing my must-do activities for that day. So for example, on Monday, between working, eating, showering, getting dressed, my cosmetic routine, transportation, and dance rehearsal, which I don't have on Monday, so that value is just a 0. That totaled out for me to be 10.75 hours, which is 10 hours and 45 minutes. Now, if we remember from the beginning, which I don't blame you if you forgot, I had allocated 11 hours to my must-do activities. So my goal was 65% of my day doing must-dos. On Monday, right below this row, I added a row that shows me the percentage. So the actual percentage of my day that was spent doing must-dos on Monday, for this example, is 63%. So this is where we start getting that flexibility in. And I'll walk us through a couple more examples of how to set up this tracker or how to set up this page. But it's really, really important to know that, okay, on Monday, I have that excess time. Just like I mentioned in last week's episode about doing the exercise of looking at the physical calendar and tangibly penciling in when you have things going on Monday, maybe I have done that activity, and then I look down and see, oh, okay, I wanted to do 65% of my day doing these things. I'm doing 63%. I'm in a good place. So just something to think about as you work through this activity, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. So pretend I've explained everything through all these days. I'm looking now and I'm just reflecting on how my days are looking so far. And I see, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, good. We're at that 63%, like I said. Friday's looking good. We're at 63%. But Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday are looking a little interesting. So on Thursday, I have rehearsal. I put it in for 2 hours, and it takes me probably an hour and a half between traffic and everything to get to and from and to drop off all my friends in my carpool. So that, between everything else I have to do that I determined in my pre-planning that I have to do, my total hours that I'm spending on Thursday doing must-do activities is 13.25, which is 13 hours and 15 minutes. And if we remember, I only have 11 hours to do my quote-unquote must-do activities. So my percentage is 78 on Thursday of doing must-do activities. So, like I said in the example for Monday, that day I had a little bit of flex time. I had room, I had 2% left remaining to allocate to other things. On Thursday, I went over more than 10%. I went 13% over what I had planned. So Thursday might be a day that I need to tone it down in the should-dos and the would-like-to-dos just so that I don't go over 100% of my day, because it's impossible to spend more than 100% of your time, and the only flex we have, in the sake of this time budgeting example, is in our sleep. And I really, really don't want to encourage you to sacrifice sleep just for the sake of getting things done, so keep that in mind as you're working through this activity. But then, like I said, Saturday and Sunday are looking a little weird too, and I realize I don't have work on Saturday. I don't have to do necessarily a cosmetic routine. I don't have anyone to get ready for. I don't have rehearsal. And I gave myself an hour of transportation time, just because, I don't know, maybe I'm going somewhere on a Saturday. But I only spent 2.5 hours of my day doing must-do things on Saturday. I only use 15% of my day doing things I have to do. Same on Sunday, it's 44%, so I still have plenty of flex room there. So on Saturday, obviously it's the weekend. We know how in America, typically the weekend is the fun time, so it makes sense that I have a really low number on Saturday. But this means for all of the should-dos and would-like-to-dos, Saturday is a really good time for me to schedule these things, because clearly I have plenty of extra time in that must-do category. That's example number 1. Big, long, drawn-out example number 1 of how to kind of work through the time budgeting for one of our categories. So just to kind of touch on a couple things in the should do and the would like to do's before we get on to summarizing this spreadsheet or summarizing your chart or however you decide to work on this activity. Going through the should do's, I listed out laundry, house chores, going to the gym, class pass, personal admin. It's doing my budget or clearing out my emails or anything personally that I have to manage in a way. I just called it personal admin. I don't know. You can call your activities whatever you want to call them here. But laundry, house chores, gym, class pass, personal admin. So, like I said, I'm allocating 25% of my day to my personal should do category. So for me, there's going to be a few zeros across the board here. Like for the must do, pretty much every single day of the week had a value in each category, unless it was like dance rehearsal and obviously work on Saturday and a little bit of Sunday. Should do and would like to do, you're going to see a lot more zeros, and that's okay. That's completely normal, because depending on how you budget out your must do's, you're going to have less available time for these should do's and would like to do. So that's going to actually just happen naturally. Don't freak out if you're like, why are all these zeros and I have one value in this? It's normal. The further you get down this chart, the more zeros you're going to see. So in my should do's, again, throwing back to a number that I mentioned probably 15 minutes ago, I allocated myself 4 hours, 25% of my time. So for laundry, I'm obviously not going to be doing hours and hours of laundry every single day. So maybe I put a couple hours on like one day of the week to actually do it. And then I am the kind of girl that lets the laundry sit there until it's almost ready to be done again. So just to be on top of it and pretending that I'm super responsible and good at laundry, I'll give myself 2 hours on the day after to put it all away, fold it, and pretend like it never happened, right? Although I have given myself 4 hours of should do time every single day, I'm probably not going to use all 4 hours, right? Like if I was doing laundry and chores and going to the gym and doing personal admin every single day, maybe I would use all 4. But I'm going to do laundry maybe twice a week. I'll be generous there. I'm going to do chores around the house maybe a little bit every single day. That would be nice. But realistically, especially with how busy I am on that Thursday, I probably won't get any chores in that day. So, and maybe I throw 25 minutes on or, 15 minutes on every single day in hopes that I do it. And maybe on Saturday I throw in 3 hours. That'd be a nice deep clean kind of day. Gym, class pass, I would like to put on maybe at least 5 hours a week. If not, no big deal. Again, this is the should do category, so it would make life a lot more nice and efficient and wholesome. But again, life will go on if I don't do these. But I really should be. And then personal admin, like going through my emails, it would be great if I could just wake up in the morning and have a clear inbox and not be spammed with all of my ads from Target and Jimmy John's and every single app that I'm signed up for. So going through my emails is something that I would like to spend time on doing every day. But these are all just my personal examples. And keeping in mind, remember, that total column that I talked about on the right side of all these days of the week, it's just fun to look at because I haven't actually gone through this example tangibly for myself yet. For this stage of life, I did it completely in college, but looking at house chores, it's really only 2 hours out of the week that I have allocated to it. It can feel like a lot in the moment, but seeing that total column and realizing, oh, only 2 hours out of my whole week I'm doing chores, it's actually not that bad. So it can be a nice little reality check too. If you sometimes feel like you're drowning in things and you realize, oh wait, it's only 3 hours of my week, maybe I can get over it and push through. So it can be a nice little humbling column there to have too. So then in the would like to do category, this is going to be something that I encourage you to do last, just like in our exercise last week with scheduling, right? The water and the grains of rice, the would like to do and could do categories, these are things that really, really need to be scheduled at the very end or at least not first. And don't allocate the time to these first in this time budgeting exercise. You don't want to lose out on precious time in your must-do categories because you're going to hang out with friends too much or you're going to play games or you're going to the bar. These things are great, but they cannot come before taking care of yourself and functioning in this working world or in the school world or whatever stage of life you're in. So that's why I put this category last. And for my personal self, I allocated 10% to this because when I really think about it, going to dance rehearsal, I must do it. It is in my must-do category, but it's really fun to me. I really do enjoy it. I like to do it. It's a source of socializing for me. It's a source of relaxation. It's a source of exercise. So while it does fall in my must-do, it doesn't mean that I'm not having a good time doing it. Same with going to the gym or using ClassPass or things like that. Those are things that get me out of the house and moving and socializing and having a good time. So my would like to do category has shrunken a lot for sure since college because I don't have all of the bar theme nights on here anymore. But now it's just going out with my friends, exploring the city, planning and organizing my week, playing games and things like that. So again, 10% of my time, I would like to pencil in every day a couple hours to actually go out and do things with my friends. But some days I'm just really lazy and I don't feel like doing that. So maybe I schedule nothing, maybe on a Monday I'm super exhausted from just starting the work week off and maybe I leave that as zeros across the board because when I get home I just want to do nothing. Or maybe I want 9 hours of sleep that day. Maybe 7 hours just isn't cutting it, and I want to sleep extra long before I jump into Tuesday. So this would like to do category is another great place to flex in if you need more or less sleep. This is a great place that you can kind of pull from that. So, oh my goodness, we have worked our way through this entire kind of chart. We've worked our way through all the categories, and now I'm going to draw your attention to two really important features of my own spreadsheet that I encourage you to incorporate into your own tracker, whatever that may look like, your own time budget, whether that's in Excel, whether that's in Google Slides or whatever, whether that's pen and paper, whatever you choose to do, however you choose to break this down. I really, really encourage at the very bottom of your table or however you're working it, I put a total percentage row on here. So it'll add up the percentage from Monday, my must-do category, my should-do category, and my would-like-to-do category. So in theory, if I've actually stuck to my time budget, 65% of my time on Monday would have been planned for my must-dos, 25% of my time on Monday would have been planned for my should-dos, and 10% of my time on Monday would have been planned for my would-like-to-dos. Now, like I said, I have not actually added my correct numbers into the example I'm working off of today, so these numbers are going to be completely wrong, and I apologize, but this is what I'm looking at on the screen, so it's what I'm going to talk about now just for the sake of giving you an example. So for this scenario, on Monday in my must-do category, I was good. I was at 63% out of 65, so I was good there. Moving down to should-do, for some reason I had ended up planning 56% of my day in should do, which means I put way too many hours into my should do for that day. And again, I haven't updated the numbers versus my college. I just changed the names of the categories and kind of shifted things around a bit, so this is not actually correct. But I did a really, really bad job at time budgeting on Monday because apparently in my example, I gave myself 56% of my day doing should do's, and I was supposed to only have 25, so not good. And then, even worse, I looked down at my would like to do category, and I have planned 100% of my day doing my like to do's when I was supposed to only have 10. And again, I want to disclaim the numbers in this are wrong. I still have different categories and different things in here from my college example. I just copy and pasted it onto a new tab and kind of tweaked things around a bit to make it make sense for my current stage of life. But yeah, that's why these numbers are crazy. I wouldn't actually have 56% and 100% when it's supposed to be 25 and 10. But at the very bottom, it's showing me right now that I have planned 219% of my day. Clearly, that is not possible. And obviously, I need to play around with this a little bit and actually make it realistic and go through this exercise myself. But obviously, you can't plan 200% of your day. That's 48 hours. You don't have that. Or whatever 17 times 2 is. I think it's 35 or 34. I don't know. Don't yell at me. But this is why this exercise is so important, because when you look at the reality of how much of your day you have physically allocated to each activity, and you really break it down in a granular way where you assign minutes and hours to each activity that you think realistically you would spend doing them, it shows you how much time, and it gives you a broader picture on like how you're actually spending your waking hours. You may think you're being super productive, or you may think you have all the time in the world, but maybe when you're done with your must-do category, you realize that you don't have a lot of time on your hands to do maybe the things that you should do, like laundry and chores, or maybe you really do more laundry and chores than you should be because you don't have time to do things like eat or shower or take care of yourself. So this exercise is really cool, especially if you want to seriously get into scheduling and planning your week and your month very strategically and very effectively. And I actually had just resurfaced this activity about 6 to 7 months ago last summer when I first recorded the first half of my first episode. Wow, I didn't think I could use the word first that many times in one sentence. But the first time I ever recorded, I mentioned that time budgeting was something I wanted to talk about on the podcast because it had resurfaced in my mind, and I thought it was really, really relevant to my current stage of life where I'm in still a little bit of that transition period where college is over. I still have friends that go, but I'm also not like a full-blown parent or anything to where I have all the responsibilities of like a full-grown adult, as I like to say. So it's a really weird in-between stage that I'm going through right now, and then I feel like a lot of us are also going through where we're an adult, we're living out in the real world, but we still absolutely do not have it all figured out yet. So time budgeting is a really, really good way. And I will not discount regular budgeting. Financial budgeting has also been huge and has saved me so much peace of mind and honestly so much money since I began doing financial budgeting. It's been a game changer, trust me. But time budgeting is that same way. I feel like once I get back into this and once I genuinely do this activity and I don't have some crazy percentage like 219, I'll realize and I may start reevaluating, what do I spend my time on? What do I enjoy doing? What do I not enjoy doing? What do I need to do that I'm not currently doing? Or what should I spend more time doing that I right now don't spend a lot of time doing? So that was a lot, and I am going to try my best to include in the description a Google Doc that you can pull up that shows just like a template of this sheet. I use mine in Excel, but I'm going to try to upload it to Google Docs just so that I can make it shareable and you can download it and use it for yourself. I want to make sure that all the equations are functional and they work right before I do that. But by the time this episode is up, there should be a link in the description that you can access this spreadsheet for yourself, and it'll be on Google Docs. So if you're not a Google person, I apologize. That's the only way I know of to make it like shareable on the internet. And it'll be multi-platform accessible. Like you can use it if you're on a Mac, you can use it if you're on a PC, or even on your phone if you're into that. So I want to be able to give the resource because I know not everyone works in Excel, but it's nice to just have everything laid out for you, and then you can use your brain power on selecting the categories you want to use, selecting what kind of percentages you want to use. So things like that will just make this a little bit easier, and hopefully it allows you to think about your scheduling in a different way. That kind of concludes the actual topic of time budgeting. This series was really fun to me because it's two things that I am aware that there is a good way to do, but I'm not so sure that I'm actually doing them the correct way as we speak. And that is a really big goal of mine on this podcast is I want to share the best practices with you, but I also really want to start implementing them in my own life. Like literally when I click end on the recording session, I'm going to work through this exercise for myself and just see how my budget is looking, how my time is looking in life, where I'm spending my time. Maybe I should reallocate and things like that. Everything I just walked us through, I really want to do this exercise for myself and just get myself in a better place moving forward in the year. It just became February, like we're very fresh into it, and it's unbelievable that a full month has already gone by in 2024. I feel like I blinked and now it's February, which don't get me wrong, I'm really excited for the month of hearts, but things like this, like a time budget, could have maybe changed the way that my January flew by. Maybe if I had a better grasp on everything I was doing, or maybe just understood better where the time was going, it would have given me more time to just focus on living in the moment and taking in the time that is just going by way, way, way too fast. So remember, hit me up if you're on that planet that has more than 24 hours in a day, because I would love a ticket to move there forever. So I'll go ahead and cut us off here before it starts getting too weird. Thank you so much for joining me on this 2-part series. I hope you liked it. And if you're interested in more series like this, or there's a topic that you're interested in me covering, or you think that my spin on things or my life experience would give some expertise to anything, please let me know. I would love to get your feedback because I do make this podcast for me, but I also make it for those who listen. And I would love to brew up something special that you would love to listen to and that you would like to share. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening this week, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.